bedside table.
Looking.
We're ready to.
Okay, welcome everyone to the Climate Protection Work Group meeting for Tuesday, September 30th. I'll just set aside our traditional land acknowledgement because today's a very unique day. It's the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, and Ms. Falls has started a tradition a few years ago of meeting in our Centennial Park and walking over to Duck Island to our new, well, relatively new healing circle there. So I would invite all the community to join us as we keep in mind our Algonquin ancestors who cared for this land and water. So I'm now looking at the agenda.
Mm-hmm. If you want
to 5 o'clock.
There we go.
It's well publicized.
It's a wonderful service.
It is. Wonderful. It's quite beautiful. I'll just accept the motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Nate, seconded by Peter. Any changes? All in favor? That's carried. And now our October 21st meeting minutes and September 16th. No, I think we're just approving the September 16th minutes.
Yep.
Not the October. So motion to approve those. Moved by Nate, seconded by Sue. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? And as always, if you have any disclosure or monetary interest, now's a good time to declare those. And we'll get right to the emission reduction target. Richard, we do have the Nathan was going to join us if we can find him.
Yes, we're trying to raise him. Hopefully he's responding.
But if he's not there, I would suggest that if you want to, is this a draft?
Well, this is the final, really.
You'll fix the spelling on the front.
Yes. I mean, I didn't write this. I didn't write this, but yes, we'll definitely work on the spelling.
Yeah. We wouldn't spell Perth wrong.
No.
P-I-R-T-H.
Yeah, we'll have him address the spelling. I think sometimes that's like we'll go to autocorrect.
So if he was here, would he give us a high-level summary?
Yeah, like I have that. That was what I was intending to do. He was going to more speak to any things you guys wanted to discuss.
Why don't you start us off then?
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so
please.
The report supports a recommendation for a 20% midterm reduction at 2031, as well as a 45% reduction at baseline for 2036, and net zero by 2050. Mind you, there is a big caveat to this emission reduction target, but that sort of gives us a realm of reality, essentially. Like this is as close as realistic for us, based on the report. So one of the key takeaways is that, as we learned, for the corporate emissions, there's only roughly 2% of our overall emissions for 2021. And the focus would be for the transformative changes in transportation and buildings to maximize mitigation. Essentially, for looking at the community side, for example, a lot of the reductions would come from the uptake in EV vehicles and the building retrofits for residential homes. So they're doing a estimation based on an uptake of how much of the population would be doing these initiatives to get us these numbers. So these are just these general assumptions, mind you. So looking at the community side, they were saying that roughly 50% is dominated by transportation emissions, hence the big desire to reduce those numbers, as well as for building energy, which is stationary energy, which is the other large section of that. So building retrofits and looking at EV adoption and active transportation would be the most likely things to help us reduce it on the community side, but we're looking at benchmarks beyond, say, 2031, looking at 2036. So essentially, the longer we have these programs in place and the greater the adoption by the community, the longer and more likely our impacts would be beneficial. So the longer this continues, the greater the reductions. That's the idea. And looking at waste, industrial, and natural heritage measures. So looking at like retrofits for the wastewater treatment facility, or looking at measures for adaptation, or looking at things where we're enhancing our green space. They do contribute to our reductions, but they have more co-benefits. Looking at more like say adaptation benefits, for example. So in the report, he discussed it, retrofits to the wastewater treatment facility, which would be sort of like a one-time sort of impact. But the impacts to a reduction only come based on our population growth, essentially. So there's going to be more of a steady increase, but it won't really be a massive increase for wastewater based on the fact that it's just electrifying the process, essentially. So if it would be bigger impacts if we spent the money looking at more EV adoption, because it would have a greater potential for reducing emissions overall, as opposed to the one-time retrofit for the wastewater facility. That would be good, but it wouldn't be an overall massive impact overall. So while it's important, it's just in terms of like looking at the potential funding, looking at what in terms of funding or what the initiatives would be. So there may be more funding for EV update versus say wastewater management updates. And then on the corporate side, they were mostly saying that for emissions from wastewater facilities and retrofits where we see a lot of our emission reductions, especially for the wastewater facilities and for EV vehicles. And that essentially is the summary that I would add. Yes. Did you hear something?
Sounded like somebody was coming on.
Yeah, like I hear something. I just don't see anyone. You hear that?
I heard a little cough.
Yeah, like I hear someone here.
It's not locked on.
Oh, then that's this. I think he found the link. He said he had a trouble minute finding it. Nathan, are you here?
I am here.
There we are. Okay, look at that. I just did a bit of a run through.
Yeah,
of the...
I saw the last few minutes of you, Richard, and I apologize for the link went to my spam and I had trouble finding it. My apologies.
That's okay. It happens to the best of us. Oh.
Do you want to introduce our guest?
Sure. Okay, this is Nathan Manuel from Greenscale, and he is the consultant working with us and the author of this report, and he'd be able to give you more in-depth answers to your questions. I know Nate Morris had a question then, so.
Hi, Nathan. It's Peter McKenna. I'm the chair of the meeting. And
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. If you're ready, Richard has just provided, we've all received the feasibility analysis a few days ago, and Richard has provided a high-level summary. And we are delighted that you're able to join us for perhaps some more detailed questions. So if you're ready, we'll just jump in.
Sure.
Okay. And does anybody want to go first? I had one question. It's kind of an odd question, I think, coming from me. As we do our population growth here in Smiths Falls, we have some estimates. That, let's say it even goes up 10% over a couple of decades. Most of that, all of our, most of the population growth would have to live somewhere. Most of them will live in probably newer built or brand new built or yet to be built housing, knowing that newer homes and newer apartment buildings are much greener and more efficient. Is that factored in that the population growth would likely be living in new subdivisions with less impact on greenhouse gas emissions?
That's a really good question. All of those are absolutely things that have to be considered. The short answer is not specifically, no. All of these are based on approximate slopes, and the key thing here is to, and this is sort of the longer answer here. The key thing is to try and focus on these sort of estimations are going to be a lot more accurate in the short term, and then the further you go out, they're going to be a lot less accurate. And for the things that are the least accurate, such as accounting for what these new builds are going to be like, those types of other projections, those are all things that you're going to have to coordinate with a lot of different people. You may have to get up with building standards. You may have to get these things. So that's why they're also, they're going to take longer to initiate as well. Those things aren't included, but they're also, they're at a point where you're not really making decisions about them yet. There are a few things you have to sort of get into place in order to set those things up. And I think that's at least what I'm hoping to try and push the most from this report is that, all of these things have to be considered, but some of them are going to take longer and some of them are going to be you're going to get to a lot quicker.
So we'll be setting the table for some of these longer terms.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's really the best, if you kind of start with a template where you have what's our short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans and actions associated with those. If you start with sort of breaking them up into those, and then whatever sort of actions and things you come up with and ideas you come up with, think about where does it fit within one of those 3 time scales, and that's going to help you organize your priorities and organize your finances and understand what sort of infrastructure and finances you're going to have to put into place so that your long-term goals are going to be in order, where ultimately that's where the most of your reductions are going to come from, is long-term.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nate?
Hi. So, sorry, I got a couple questions for you, but just quickly touching on what Peter just talked about with the population growth and the hope that there'd be more modern buildings to house the new arrivals. In addition to the anticipated reduction in emissions from heating and whatnot, if we're not using gas, there's also the GHG emissions from the act of building itself, and that I know in other municipalities is modeled to be like a pretty significant contributor. And I'm wondering, because that strikes me as something that the town might actually be able to exert some significant influence over if we create building codes that are, facilitate green building. And I know there's, I imagine you know way more about this, but there's something called the Green Builders Alliance that has put out a bunch of recommendations around low GHG building. And if we were to embrace some of those, do you think, could that potentially curve some of these emissions related to the population growth? Does that sound like a workable strategy there?
Yeah, I have a lot of short answers, long answers for most of these questions, I think. So yes and no. There's a lot of questions wrapped up there. I'm just going to make some notes here for a second, and then get them for you. So yes, lots of experience with this, and what you're sort of talking about is the life cycle assessment or the life cycle of buildings. And there's a couple of different parts in that life cycle that you sort of mentioned. One of them was the greenhouse gases associated with the construction of those builds and the building materials that go into those buildings. That's sometimes it's called the embodied energy, or sometimes the upstream emissions of those buildings. And those can be significant, absolutely. And I'll touch on those again in a second. The other part you talked about was the efficiencies of the building. So how much natural gas and how much electricity that building might use in a particular year. That one is a really important one. That's a one that I think you have the most control over right now in the municipality when it comes to new builds. And there's a couple of different types of mechanisms that you can use depending on which sector. So when you look at, one of them, I'm working with the city of Kingston on it was called the Green Standard CIP Community Improvement Plan that they're using for new commercial and MERB buildings. and it's based on similar. It's based on a couple of different national and federal green building standards. So it's associated with the Canadian Association of Green Building Canada, where you can have a couple different standards. And primarily what they're looking at foremost and trying to push the most are minimum performance standards. So what's the minimum um, energy use and minimum thermal use per square foot or square meter of new buildings? So they have to meet a minimum standard. And if they go beyond that and they meet higher standards, then they have their CAP program that will help reward, not say reward, but essentially all the extra money that a builder or developer would put into the building to make it better and perform better or add renewable energy. They get some feedback or some initiatives and grants back for that. So that's one area where you're looking at, say, minimizing the operational life cycle of that building. When you're looking at, say, the materials and how much greenhouse gas goes into the actual construction of the building, it does tend to be a smaller piece of the pie. And it also tends to be more of a long-term, one of those long-term plan things. The short-term plan is more on looking at the performance per square foot. The long-term plan would be inventories. And this follows a similar path to what Europe did. They've always been sort of decades ahead of us in terms of this. But in the Netherlands, for example, what they had was they, again, started off with their footprint. And then several years ago, they said, on top of that, we're also going to require what's called the life cycle inventory to be included. And that's where you include the greenhouse gases of those building materials and those the things that you were referring to. So absolutely, it's a part that can help reduce it. But because it's that smaller piece of the pie, that's where I would say focus on those in sort of your longer term plans. And in these shorter term plans, focus on things that are going to try and reduce that energy and thermal use per square foot. Those are the ones that you have the most control over. You're going to be able to get some grants for things like CIPs and other types of municipal devices. So yeah, I think that certainly the embodied energy of those buildings is important. But I think what's probably most important, and this is where the life cycle comes in, is ensuring that buildings are going to last for a long time. So make sure they're going to last a long time, because even if something maybe has a high embodied energy, let's say it has a lot of concrete in it, but it's going to last 120 years and it has a super low footprint, long term, that's going to be really valuable. So that's why it's important to look at a couple of different things at the same time.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Nathan in a minute. I just want to check on your time. You're good till about 3?
I'm good till 3, and I booked you guys some time off. So if you have a few minutes and want to go past it, I'm fine with that.
Okay. I'll go over to Peter and then back to Nathan.
Yeah. My question is more fundamental. In order to have meaningful understanding of zero emission, I thought that we should actually look at the number of parts per billion of carbon dioxide we have in our atmosphere, because that has been one of the more general knowledge. So question is, what is the pre-industrial emission? Second is, what is the parts per billion for the year 2019? That's our baseline. And what is our emission at this point?
I'm going to repeat that. I'm not totally sure I fully understand the question, but I'll try and see here. So you're asking, you're referring to the 2019 baseline for Smith Falls, right?
Right.
Okay. And so in this report, all of the comparisons were made to that baseline. Was there a different baseline you were referring to?
I'm referring to parts per billion of carbon dioxide for the year of 2000.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so so you want it reported in parts per billion emitted?
Right.
Well, that would require a volume of air to calculate. So that's why we calculate it on a mass basis, because you'd still end up calculating on a mass, and the mass is calculated that way because that's how inventories are calculated. You can calculate it as a PPB if you want, but it won't. It's never used in that reporting term when you're applying for grants or you're applying for FCM funding.
Okay,
Those
actually,
types of
my question is simpler than that. Example,
things.
what I heard was last year, the number of parts per billion of carbon dioxide is 420. And
Yeah.
this year, the new figure I heard is 430. So
Yeah.
the question is, what was the pre-industrial era data? Is it 340, 360? So that way we know for both, what the total global figure is as an anchor point. If we want to reduce our emission, how much could we put that down? Example, if we say by 2050, the global emission is 440, then it is actually up our net zero. Doesn't really matter much compared with the total figure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get, if we could, I don't want to go down that
Okay.
path. Just,
Could I just quickly speak to that, if you don't
if
mind?
it's short.
Yeah, so just to kind of echo what Peter's saying here, because I think he's touching on a really interesting concept. There's one number that we're talking about, which is the town's emissions as measured in this scope 2 analysis, or just talking about the local stuff. And then there's the like how it works out in the wash of all of the emissions that we're producing and everyone else, and the wetlands and the forest fires and everything else. And that's measured in the parts per million in the atmosphere of CO2. And I think perhaps not as an either or, but as a both, it would be nice to acknowledge that in our own modeling, and because one of the things that I've flagged is that even if we do everything right on a local level, unless there's systems changes in the way that we manage the forests and the impact from insects and the melting of the permafrost, it's not actually going to have the effect of solving the climate change crisis to do all the things that we're talking about doing. And what Peter's talking about there, where we're also monitoring the actual net amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, would be a way of kind of acknowledging that reality and charting it. I don't know if that, yeah. If you wouldn't mind just commenting on that.
Sure. So I understand where you're coming from there. It's great from an educational perspective. One of the things that I think is really important, particularly at this stage, I think that would have been absolutely great 15 years ago. At this stage, where we're trying to, you got to apply for funding, you got to do it fast, you've got to engage builders. Every bit of information that you're conveying to people has to have a purpose. And the PPB is great from a modeling perspective and how this works in science. That information is never going to be used by the public to understand what renovations they're going to make for their house. It's not going to be used by FCM in their funding for this. It's not going to be used for grants. So all of this is really important and it's really great. It's just not really the right thing for here and for this particular grant and for the focus that what you need to work on. So it might be great in communications and other spheres, just not right here.
Okay. Nate, I think you had another question.
So I have a few questions, but let me just focusing on what you were saying about how these numbers are much more accurate in the near term and become less accurate as you scale out. I think that's a really important lens to look at this, and I think I would like to mostly focus on the near term. Like, should the council approve what we're proposing, it's going to have effects like the next year and the year after that and the year after that I think are much more predictable than beyond that. And just in terms of making sense of all of these numbers, my understanding is that the idea is that in the initial, like in the early phases of this, we're leaning really heavily on our corporate emissions because we have a greater capacity to influence those, and the hope being that by leaning heavily into that, we can facilitate the community producing more meaningful gains a little bit further down the road. And I think as a logical progression, that makes sense. But in terms of just the numbers working out, if our corporate emissions are only 2% of our total emissions, and our recommendation here is a 3% reduction every year, we would, in the first year, we would have to get our corporate emissions down to net zero, and we still wouldn't even be there, right? And there's no universe where we're about to get our corporate emissions down to zero in the first year. So I'm not seeing how the math works on that. Could you speak to that?
Sure. For the corporate, I think there's two things that in the short term are really important. The first is, and this goes for the community too, is what are your low-hanging fruits? And in the corporate side, you have your transportation, getting more efficient cars. That's really going to be your best way. And net zero, you can go to right away to electric. That's fantastic. But if you don't have the capital funding for it, or maybe you don't necessarily have the charging infrastructure, hybrids are also great. They could be 40% less emissions than a regular car. So, the first part is there's lots of ways that the corporate side can certainly reduce and get down. You need those 3% for their first 2 years on just looking at maybe your fleet turnover and increasing that turnover rate. So maybe instead of turning them over every 9 years, you turn them over every 6. But the other part, and I think that this is what I was trying, and maybe I didn't convey it properly in the report, the corporate is supporting the community. So if the corporate happens to increase, that's kind of okay depending on where you're looking at it. So let's say, for example, you have some sort of transit or some sort of fleet emissions that have to go up, but they enable the community to have reduced emissions. Perhaps they get better transportation from place A to place B, and you reduce the community side by a greater proportion than you would the corporate. So, how the corporate supports the community can be a couple of different ways. And I think there's some low-hanging fruit on the community side as well. There's Lanark County, City of Kingston. They've all gone through the pathway of being able to apply for funding for like Better Homes programs that enable people with propane and heating oil to be able to replace those. Those are the dirtiest fuels. Those are going to give you a nice bump down. What's also really nice about those homes and those people is that those also tend to be the lower incomes that can't afford the renovations to begin with. So being able to target those lower income people, or those, I should say, those dirtier fuels, also simultaneously happens to address some of those homes as well. So yeah, I think that's again, it's where you really have to really break down each of those actions and say, which of these timelines does it set up? And it's okay. You're only going to maybe shave off a couple % per year, but that's all you really got to do. You just got to keep the ball moving and make sure that you're setting yourself up for the next step.
Yeah, it's Peter again. We have 2 Peters and 2 Nathans, which is great. The world's good. I never considered the municipality to be it's not our 2%, we weren't going to have a big impact on greenhouse gases by reducing our fleet, but it's the levers we have, the grant applications, the facilitating of the community, the partnerships, that's where we've got. We'll do keep our own house in order and heading in the right direction, but there's so much, that's where the real, as you say, low-hanging fruit is.
Absolutely. And really that's why, fundamentally why these inventories were broken up the way that they are into the community and corporate, because the policies and the mechanisms that you're using to reduce emissions in each of those are going to tend to fall under different types of policy mechanisms. So the same types of approaches, like you said, I think, Nate, where you can do the corporate really quickly and really easily. You can, because you don't have to necessarily go through as many different bureaucratic steps of approval as you would for something happening in the community. So yes, you absolutely can go quicker and faster for some of those things. So yeah, that's the trade-off.
I'm looking at others. Sue wants to jump in.
Hi, Nathan. Thanks very much for joining us. I don't have much to say. I'm ecstatic at the targets that you're recommending for us. Just ecstatic. In large part because I come out of working with the Lanark County plan, which set abysmally low targets, and unnecessarily low in my estimation. And to come out of working with the Tay Valley plan, which has really nicely high aspirational targets. So I'm thrilled with the targets you're proposing for us. I only have one very specific question, and that's in the context of transportation, community transportation, and let me get it right here. T2, I think it is.
Give us a page
The
number.
municipal, the dollar ride, public transit, that sort of stuff. You say that the share of community emissions in going with that would be low, but would that be electric
Spell.
vehicles,
Right.
or does that make a difference?
T2, table 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just let me look through here for a second.
Yeah.
And what was your specific question again, now that I'm here?
Well, I'm intrigued that you're estimating that the benefit of the share of community emissions will be low if we were to implement that sort of program. And I'm just wondering, is that based on only using fossil fuel vehicles, or I'm assuming we would go to electric vehicles with public transit system, and that would be much more beneficial. I'm intrigued.
I think it had to do with at least current population dynamics in Smith Falls, and the belief, or at least the understanding, that a lot of this transportation were people commuting to and from outside of Smith Falls for work. I think that for the uptake consumption, I think it could be, you could get to a low to a moderate depending on the electrical vehicles. But yeah, I think that's really the limitation that I saw, at least in the modeling, was that it didn't seem, at least, that there was and again, I don't have a lot of information for transportation in Smith Falls. All I really have is fuel use and commuting distances. But that was sort of my thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if we would have said 3 years ago electrification, I'm feeling more pessimistic. And we have Via Rail talking about not stopping at as many places. And it's just, anyways. Nate, talk to you.
So I love the idea of being able to achieve the goals that you've outlined there. I second what Sue's saying there. I guess I'm a little more skeptical that it's realistic to achieve those. And again, no one would be happier than me if we could achieve them, but I just frankly don't think we can afford them. At least I'm not sure that it's realistic that we could afford them. So I'm wondering if you could just outline a best guess, low, medium, high of what you think it would cost, at least in those first few years, to actually achieve these goals.
I don't think I can give you an uptake cost because it depends so many things. Uptake levels, timing, tariffs. You're gonna have to throw that in the list now. So there's a lot of things where I don't know if I can give you an exact number. I will say another thing that's sort of interesting in this. You talked a bit about electrification. I think I put this in the report. I'm not sure whether it was something that people flagged or not. But Ontario's electricity grid is dirtier than it was in 2018. It's about twice as dirty as it was in 2018. It's going to continue to get dirtier until 2040. So any of your electrification things, it's still going to be better than doing natural gas or anything else. Absolutely. So continue the electrification. All that means is that it's going to slow it down. It might not have the same rate of reduction you might see until, say, after 2040, when the expected Ontario electricity grid is lower. That being said, there are some initiatives that can speed that up for you locally. So one of those is, as part of the, say, better homes or retrofits or even the new builds, in order to meet some of those energy footprints, they're going to have to put in some type of renewable energy. What we see, and there's some information out there, is that for communities that switch from fossil fuel based energy to renewable based energy, and particularly renewable energy produced locally, is that you go from 90% of the money being spent on energy leaving your community to down to about 40 to 50% of the money leaving your community. And that's a really important part here that I think is hard to factor into that cost. And that's why the uptake level is really important, is because as soon as you start to invest in the local renewable energy, more money stays in the community, more money is now available for more renewable energy, and becomes this positive feedback loop. And so I think what's really important to convey to the community and to people is that when you're paying money for fossil fuels, none of that money is staying locally, maybe 10% max. And it's mostly going to low paying jobs. So when you really got to be doing is you really want to be investing in local renewable energy. You're going to be investing in local distributors, local contractors. You're going to build that community. And you know what? Then maybe your flexible transit might be up a little bit.
If I could just follow-up question there. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm certainly not asking you to give me like a number on it, but even if you can't do like the medium and high end guess on my concern is that a lot of people don't like environmentalists because they think that we're poor stewards of the tax dollars money, and we tend to propose things that we can't afford. And in this case, even at the absolute low end estimate, to achieve a 3% reduction annually, I don't see how that wouldn't cost millions. Like, am I wrong about that? Like, can you spell out any scenario where we could do that for less than even like $500,000 every year in expenditure?
Sorry, I just need to add.
Yep.
Who is incurring that expense? You're just talking about the corporation of Smiths Falls? Or you're talking about the whole community?
I'm saying when the council votes to approve these goals, implicitly they're voting to commit tax dollars towards this effort. And some sense of how much tax dollars would need to be spent to achieve these goals, even if it's not a firm number, just some kind of, are we talking $50,000, $500,000, $5 million? Like, where in that range do you see this being in order to hit that 3% as opposed to say 1%?
You're not talking then about the investment by the consumer, the homeowner.
Correct. So I'm talking about as a budgetary issue for this council.
That's a far smaller piece from the municipality, because actually the community is the larger part of this.
That may well be true, but I would like to hear his best guess on what are we actually proposing that the town would budget for this?
So I will answer it this way, and I'll answer the same way that I addressed Kingston City Council a few weeks ago. The best way to compare and say which is going to be the most cost-effective way forward is to use a metric: cost per project, or cost per energy produced, or cost per square foot. Those types of things. They're easy metrics, and you can compare across them all. When you look at, say, what's the cost of building A versus building B, the other thing you need to include are things such as cost of carbon, cost of electricity going up, cost of energy going up. when you incorporate all those metrics into your cost analysis, which you should be doing anyway at any corporate or community level for any large expenditure development, then you take that and you say, well, what's this compared to the one that doesn't? And I'll be honest, I've never seen a project that uses less energy over time that costs more. And I've never seen any type of project that does that. It just doesn't. And the other thing that's really hard, and I think what really needs to be done in a lot of these budgets, and what's happened in the past, is what's called market failures. And so in macroeconomics, a market failure is when you have a system where you've done an economic analysis, but you've missed a piece of the puzzle. So, and this happens a lot in the past when it comes to environmental costs. One of the famous ones in the early 2000s, the Ontario Medical Association did an estimate on the cost of to the Ontario medical healthcare system that was associated with fossil fuel burnings from coal-fired power plants. And it was like $2.2 billion per year in the healthcare costs. If you had taken that and put that to people's electricity bills in 2002, they would have been all over the green energy plan from day one. So I think what's really important is not what's the total cost of A. That's not important. What's the cost is what options A, B, and C. What's the cost of all three of these, and use common metrics so that everyone knows what the comparison is. Because I can give you a flat out number today, and next year the inflation will go up and it'll be nothing. What's more important is everyone needs to talk about a common metric, so that way each development project is considering what's the energy efficiency per square foot, what's your cost, and what's your carbon reduction cost. So for each of these projects, what's the cost to reduce the carbon on this particular project? Those are the things you really need to be able to use to compare them. And that way, when you come to a decision, you can say, look, here's the cost for A, but if we didn't do it this way, it's going to be a whole lot more cost long term, and we don't need that.
Yeah, no, that's a good answer. We've had this discussion around this table several times, and I keep coming back to the municipalities already spending money on capital projects. They will be spending probably $100 million over the course of a 4-year term, and we're going to spend that money anyways without increasing it.
Yeah.
Can we spend it smarter? Can we spend it better?
And that's why some of the recommendations they're trying to put in there, such as, incorporating these changes with corporate events and community events that are already going to happen anyway. So, for example, fleet turnover, right? So if you can do it two ways. If you're going to turn the fleet over every 9 years, when you turn it over, pick an electric vehicle, pick a hybrid vehicle when you change it over, or speed it up by 1 or 2 years. It's maybe you're increasing your cost by an extra 10%, but you're going to reduce your emissions by a lot more. So, trying to look at ways that you can fit these into those existing decision-making mechanisms will really help you a lot too.
So I don't disagree with what you're saying. You're preaching to the choir. It's inarguable that over the long term, it's suicidal to not spend money on climate change, and that it's terrible. Like we're watching our house burn. It obviously makes sense to put it out. I'm totally aligned, but in terms of the push and pull factors of why we're not doing 5% reductions or 10% annually, why is it 3, not 2? I do think that the reason climate change is such a troublesome issue is because it does cost money up front to address these things. And if we're in a position like Smith Salzin where we simply don't have that money, there's a reason why the country is not meeting these targets. And I do think this needs to be grounded in some real numbers. And the example you described of instead of turning over the fleet every 9 years, turning it over every 6 years. Yes, and I think if you look at that over a 10-year span or a 20-year span, you will see a reduction in fuel costs that offsets that, and that may very well be a good investment. However, the reason why we're not just turning it all over right now is because we can't afford it. And that extra 10% or whatever to switch from 9 to 6 is a real expenditure that would come out of the money that we might otherwise be able to get a pool or some other things that would help address the climate crisis here at home. And I do think it's important to ground these in actual expenditures. And I would really like to try to get you to give some kind of a ballpark guess on what it would cost. But if I can't do that, could I get you to just discuss like why are we not calling it 4%? Like what are the push and pull factors if we're not tying this to cost?
Well, you are tying it to cost. I just think that you need to evaluate it on a project by project basis, and it needs to be in a cost per whatever that next metric. And there's a couple of different metrics. You know, there's not a single metric, unfortunately, that says this is the most sustainable thing. There's lots of different, and each planning building, each planning location needs context, and it needs to be able to look at holistically. You can't just go, this is everything's in A or B or black and white. But it really has to come down to use that metric of here's our cost reduction, here's our carbon reduction, and here's the cost that it's going to take per ton for this development. But also factor in what's the cost of carbon and what's the cost of your electricity that's going up, because those are also part of that's also going to play into it. And that's going to show people that look, this is going to reduce your energy costs. This is going to reduce your utility bills. And if the corporation doesn't have to pay as much utility bills, well, we don't have to charge you as much income tax from you or property tax from you. You can use that for something else. So it's absolutely hard. I don't envy municipalities in your decision making. It's hard, but somebody's got to do it.
Can I know we're conscious of time, but you mentioned you went to Kingston Council. I assume there was a committee that brought forward a proposal and that you went there to back up as a consultant. Were you as involved with that committee as you are with this one? And if so, do you have any advice for us as we go forward to council to adopt our plan?
It's a good question. I think there's no single bullet. I think that's the important part. It's going to be a lot of little things, which I think that sounds less daunting. I think you're going to have to chip away at this. You're going to have to, but there's lots of little things, and it's going to be a holistic part. One of the questions that was asked at City Council was related to what Hydro One and what they weren't doing. I said, well, sure, Hydro One's one player, but there's a lot of people that are going to have to come into this. Utilities Kingston is going to have to get in on it as a player. Developers are going to have to do a player. I think what's really important is that this isn't just about, this isn't just about trying to lead with a stick and saying you have to do this. It's trying to show people the opportunities with the carrot and trying to show them the opportunities that this is presenting. I think too often these types of climate change actions have presented as something where we have to change what we're doing. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think we just have to adapt to what we're doing.
I'm assuming Kingston, and I'm going to go to Sue, assuming Kingston has a fairly strong advocacy community groups, or a number of them. We have some leaders in our community. Smith Falls is not a hotbed as opposed to some other small towns around us. So when you look for the champions, it would likely be council as opposed to Kingston, where there's probably groups to keep council's feet to the fire. But that's just an observation.
Yeah, you know what? You'd be surprised. Sometimes people's feet are being held to the fire for the wrong reasons. So it's a bit of a trade-off, But you're not wrong. There's, that's a challenge that you're going to have. I think that, for anyone who's maybe, on the fence and maybe doesn't quite get it, I think this is where trying to really bring home that cost metric is important so that you can show them what the cost benefit is. And there's real evidence out there for particularly for people who want to rent, who've got older homes, if they're still using oil and they're still using propane, or they still got single pane windows, or they've still got R10 insulation, those types of things. You can have people come in and they can do assessments and they'll see real savings. There was a really great example. We right at the beginning of the pandemic, we had our second child and we needed a bigger house, and we purchased a house that was old and needed completely renovated. Gutted, took every single window out, and within 1 month, our heating bill went down by $150 for 1 month, and that was in November. It wasn't in the middle of January. So those are those types of things where you can really, sure, it's going to cost a lot up front, but it's going to pay itself back really quickly, and it's going to be a lot better for not just for the environment, but for your wallet.
Thank you. Sue, over to you, and then we'll get close to wrapping up. Yeah.
Thanks, Nathan. I just wanted to sort of circle back because I was most intrigued by your talk about green building standards.
Yeah.
I don't want an elaborate answer right now, just sort of a yes or no. I'm intrigued that Kingston is proceeding with that, given that our premier has shut down green building standards. So can you maybe direct us to who to deal with at Kingston that is advancing that agenda?
So I'll give you 2 quick answers for this. One is that one of the programs is called Better Homes Kingston. It's similar to the Better Homes program that Lanark started. That one is specifically about creating finances for homeowners to upgrade their homes. So that's just one particular one. The Green Standard CIP, it's not so much the standard as it is a CIP. It's a community improvement plan. And they put that together. Julie Salter-Keene is who you can contact at City of Kingston. She's on holidays right now, though. She's in Spain. She doesn't get back till next week. But you can contact her. And I helped them with writing the guide for that after they started it. What it is it uses a couple of different mechanisms to help developers who are building mixed residential buildings. So let's say lower commercial, upper MERB, and these are new buildings. They have to meet a minimum standard. So they have to build something that is above the Ontario Building Code, the minimum Ontario Building Code. But they get incentives based on how much above that minimum code they reach. And so there's an A, B, and C, and they align with the Canadian Green Building group and their standards. So it aligns with their levels, so that once they reach the top level, which is net zero, they get the most incentives back. Often, most of these are the biggest. They get some grants back for the technology that they use, but the biggest mechanism they use are rebates associated with property tax over, say, a 10 to 20 year period. And that's largely the incentives that they provide. So say, look, if you reach this, we're not going to make it mandatory. We're not going to say you have to build to this standard, but if you do, we'll reward you, and that'll make it easier for you to build to it.
Thank you.
That's the catch, not mandatory. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the government doesn't know.
Mayor Panko just wants to jump in now.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thanks, Adrian. My apologies for being quite late. I know I missed part of the conversation. Overall, I'm supportive of your recommendations. I think they are both reasonably achievable, but challenging. And I think they're aspirational to a great extent. But
Yep.
and I picking up on some of the conversation here, and I agree with some of your comments back to answers to Nate here, from a standpoint that corporately we'd be looking at project to project more with making a difference. And how if we're, as an example, we're doing 3 blocks of George Street this year, we're doing water sewer works, including sewer separation. It's going to mean lower flows into our wastewater treatment plant. It means less water loss in the water supply. So it's a marginal difference, but it means less energy at both those facilities. But it's overall, the projects will continue. I think electrifying our fleet obviously is something that will happen over time as those vehicles become more readily available, especially when it comes to construction vehicles, equipment. But also respecting that our corporate emissions are, 2% of the total emissions in our community. Most are community-based. And so I'm thinking from a investment standpoint, where is the biggest bang for our buck? So would it be in council and the town focusing on renewable energy projects? So I understand, as an example, we have 3 opportunities for hydroelectric projects in town. Got to work with our partners, Parks Canada, and a lot more involved here but just one example. When we build a new facility, do we add solar? Do we add solar to some of our existing facilities now? Is that where we would get the biggest ROI? Or do we look at incentives that would enable those, properties in town, particularly homeowners, to decarbonize, move away from natural gas, oil? Not a lot of oil use in town, there's still some. So where would we, if we're going to make it an investment, where would we best target that investment?
Yeah, good question. I think if you've got sort of a decision-making tree, I would first look at what's a supply and what's a demand side change. So that's a big one. The most on the supply side, which is, the natural gas coming in, the electricity coming in, you probably have the least amount of control over those. So, but on the demand side, that's you have at least the most control short-term and midterm. So, and most of those emissions from your community are in the 2 places. They're in buildings and they're in transportation. So if you can incentivize reductions in buildings, so and you can probably say, let's say it's probably a half and half share, right? Half the responsibility is in the supply side, half is probably the demand side to some degree. So if you can incentivize your homes and make sure that all your buildings in the area, particularly the facilities side, are each new building that you're building is better than the last one. You're renovating the old ones, you're updating those types of things, that you can get all those things, in the short and midterm down to that 50%. Now you're halfway there. And then by that time, well, you're going to hopefully you've had conversations with, these bigger people, conversations with the province, conversations with the building community. And if those conversations don't go well in those first few years, well, then that kind of answers your second question, which is, should we be investing in local energy production? Well, you might have to then, if those conversations don't go well. But in the interim, while you're doing those conversations, focus on those things you absolutely do have the control over, which is the demand side. So focus on those buildings, focus on this transportation. Transportation's harder because obviously you're kind of, you can do things like create charters in the community that allow people to buy electrical. But I also said this before that, hybrids are 40 to 50 and sometimes 60% less fuel use than a regular gasoline. So I don't know, maybe there's I know there's some car dealerships in Smith Falls, so maybe you can have some conversations and push some better cars. I don't know, but yeah, that's sort of where you're where I'd see your biggest bang for your buck is focus on those things where you're going to be able to see immediate results, like better homes projects, CIP incentives, those types of things, and try and lead with the carrot because you're going to get the least amount of resistance.
Thank you.
Thanks. A last question to Nate, and then we'll wrap this up.
I want to thank you for all your input, and this is a great work product you've done for us. So thanks very much. Just on the topic of lowest hanging fruit and biggest bang for our buck, we haven't really discussed the option of offsets, and I was hoping to just get you to talk a little bit about that. And I'm familiar with companies that make biochar, and because biochar has so much carbon in it, they're able to sell 2 carbon credits for every ton of char that they make. And we've looked at the option of taking our municipal green waste and local crop residue and converting that to biochar. Am I right that if we could produce, say, 20,000 tons of biochar every year and then scale that up every year, that would effectuate the 3% goal that you're describing through offsets? Does that scan?
I thought we were. I didn't think that was the side of offsets you're going to ask. I didn't think you were producing them. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, a couple questions for you. What are you doing with the char?
So the idea would be to use it in local bioremediation settings. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
to sell the carbon credits. And we are currently already using municipal infrastructure to gather our green waste. And I'm aware that the local trees, that's part of our baseline, so they don't count. But the waste from them and all the material, and also there's a bunch, like we're surrounded by farms, so there's an enormous amount of crop residue that's available and other biomass that can easily be converted. And we already have the kilns and stuff. So like we have this infrastructure in place. And so like when we did the math looking at it, it's not unrealistic to produce 20,000 tons of biochar every year. And conceivably you could scale that up readily. And that just strikes me as much lower hanging fruit than some of the other options.
Where would that waste have gone to otherwise?
It is currently being burned in an air curtain. So all the CO2 is released into the atmosphere every year, which is carbon neutral because it's, it was captured from the atmosphere. But if we were to sequester it, biochar remains dormant for 1,000 years. It's a very stable form of carbon sequestration.
So there's two sides of that. One is if you're just producing the biochar for yourself, just spraying in the ground, you could use that. You can use that carbon credit against your inventory. Sure. If you're selling them, you don't get those credits. You just get the money. So that wouldn't necessarily go against your inventory. So you could sell them and then invest that into something else. Here's my overview of carbon offsets. And this is where I really thought you were asking the question was, should we purchase offsets for inventories, lists of things? I never advise anyone to buy offsets for a couple of reasons, but particularly at the municipal level. The reason being is that most offsets that you're purchasing are basically from renewable energy projects. So if you need the energy, then you should just be putting that money into your local renewable energy projects because you're going to get way better bang for your buck rather than paying a fraction to somebody else for them to create their renewable energy project. I always equate it. It's like, why would you elect to pay off the interest when you can pay off the principal? So that's where I think that in terms of purchasing offsets, I think that's difficult. So that's where that are you selling it versus using it question came in at the beginning there, because I think that's where it would you'd make some money, but are you using it internally or are you giving it to someone else to use? So
to be clear here, we'd be keeping it. We'd be using it.
Yeah.
No sale,
Yeah, I mean, if that's certainly an option. I don't. You have to. What would be important is to do a full life cycle assessment analysis of the whole system, understanding what's been displaced, what are your unit processes that are going to be displaced, and looking at all the sorts of things that go into it. Because there's lots of stuff where, where's it being used, how's it being used, those types of things. But yeah, it's definitely an option. Just require a bit more of a study.
Thank you. We'll be bringing this to council. We don't have a firm date yet. And I'm looking at Richard.
I was getting to it, but you're still here.
Just to let you know that we may ask you, like you did in Kingston, to be on board.
If you wanted to onboard in later in the month, makes more sense than earlier.
And we thought that it would be a well, I haven't talked to them. It's up to the mayor and the CAO, but frame it as information and then come back for approval so that council has the time to absorb it, and rather than bring it and ask them for a decision but that's all ahead of us. But it will definitely be early to mid-fall. I think that we'd be going forward. It'd be great if you were available to help answer some of those questions.
I'd be happy to be able to attend and answer any questions to help support your work.
Okay, we'll keep in touch, Nathan.
Absolutely.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm away the next week on holidays, but back after the 7th.
Okay. So there's your next step.
Yeah, this is just for us. Yeah.
This is for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Staff presentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Yeah,
So you were.
I think face is frozen now. Go on.
Is this? These are just our dates. These haven't been run through the clerk yet.
No.
See what?
We haven't selected a date, so just me planning ahead. If we're asking what the next steps are, this is sort of what I envision. So I'm working on the climate action plan. My hope is that I will have a draft by the 6th, so you guys can get a peruse. And this would be like the full thing, not just a half document that was kind of floating around our desk earlier this year. So in terms of when we would like to go to council, I know there's a special meeting on the 9th. That's why I put it there, because that's what's more accurate. But the 27th would be, I guess, the next available cow because there's the 9th, there's the 14th, which I'm not here, and then there's the 27th. So that's just kind of our dates. So we can either going early would be really quick. It'd be really fast, and then the 27th would be that the only next time. So we don't really have the luxury of the 14th because I'm not here. Yeah. So those are our options. If we're going to council on the 9th, we would have the draft resolution at least. But we wouldn't have a committee resolution because we were just discussing it yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we're probably ready to introduce it on the 9th.
Okay, all right.
And then that would give committee potentially some time to consider it before we even come back with the resolution, before the resolution would be endorsed, I guess, anyway.
So we bring it to the council to council as for information purposes.
Right.
Okay. I do have a draft resolution somewhere along there, so I have a placeholder for the numbers in case we were discussing that.
And I think we can have a draft resolution ready for the 9th.
So I mean, I have it right here.
It'd be more be a matter of if council's ready to go, or maybe they want a chance to digest it for a couple of weeks. But also, I guess, be available based on Nathan's availability too, if the 9th works for him.
I can check. I know he said to be back
Next week.
next week. Yeah, so that's like the 14th area. So he wouldn't be available for that. But I think he said he's back after the 7th. So I'll double check if he's available for the 9th, and we can have that conversation. Where are we now?
Yeah, I see it as my experience, when I get something like this at council, I like to just talk about it, think about it, come back then in a couple of weeks and then make a decision on it rather
So
than.
you want to like have a council discussion on mission targets?
Yeah, information.
Okay.
This is, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this not the first time that we're going to council?
Yeah.
Yes, because we actually have numbers now.
So they know nothing about what
Yeah.
we've been doing.
Lot to observe.
Yeah. it really
Well,
is.
that's not true. We went back when we had the milestone 1 and first time we went back, but since then nothing. So it would be like a refresher.
And I've done
Right.
some verbal updates, letting them know that this is coming on these dates. But
Good, okay.
But they haven't seen anything
some
besides,
are- understand the topic more than others, and some it'll be pretty new.
Yeah,
So part educational, part making a decision, essentially.
but we want to treat that with respect, with encouraging them to understand as much as possible, right?
Yes.
Learn and so however we need to do that.
I know there's going to be a report. There's at least that.
Right.
And then we'll have the draft resolution if they're looking at reviewing it, be attached to the report. And then there would be, I guess, Nathan discussing for any questions.
And how much of all of this material would they get? I mean, are we expecting them to read
No. So the idea is that the report is
75 pages?
no.
Or
The idea is that the report that I'll be writing to council would be a condensed version of what the report here, especially explaining how we got to this point,
Yeah.
what the report is talking about, and then ask them to consider these reduction targets. They may not be making a decision on the 9th, but at least they know where we've come from, what the report's saying, and what we're looking for.
Okay.
So that's sort of, I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. So that's
Probably
kind of
have
the
to go
goal.
right back to the beginning to say, because they approved the terms of reference. This was what the deliverables were.
Yeah, like
So I
the,
think we
yeah.
have to go right back to the start. and tell them why we did this. And
Yeah.
And the background would be kind of clear.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
We can
And-
talk before then for sure.
definitely.
And we want to lay out broadly what our expectations are of actions at the corporate level and the community level.
That's right.
Right.
So we'd also like be attaching our draft goals along with it. I don't know if the goals would come into the foray of questions unless we're talking about, I guess, implementation of what happens first. But again, we'll have rehash the same thing we had with Nathan today. So yeah.
Okay.
So, all right, that's the plan as of we leave here today, is that we're going to aim for the 9th.
Yep.
With that background and information, going back to the beginning, tell them where we are and what the next steps would be, and then coming back either late October, letting them know that we'll be coming back and that there's more information available if they want it.
Yes.
Okay.
So the next thing is the open. Sorry.
Cal isn't on the 9th or 20th. It would be on the 6th.
It's slated for the 6th, but it's that there's special meeting on the 9th. I'm almost certain there's a meeting on the 9th.
The 9th is Thursday.
So the 6th is a Cal or is the 6th a council?
6th would probably be a council meeting, might be a special Cal. So 13th would be probably a regular committee of the whole.
Well, that's even better.
Yeah.
So the 13th is a committee of the whole?
13th or 27th. Well, sorry, no. 13th is Thanksgiving Monday.
So it'd be
So
the
it-
14th.
The 14th or 27th?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying the 9th is not a Cal, it's a what?
It's going to be a council night, but it might be a special committee of the whole, but I think this is probably more for a regular committee of the whole night.
No, the 9th is a Thursday. So
Yeah, so I think 13th is the date we were looking at.
The
You mean the 14th?
14th.
Okay. I'm not here on the 14th, that's where the challenge is.
all right.
Yeah, so that's why I was trying to figure out earlier in the month, but if the month for the 9th is actually not a regular cow, then we'll have to look at the 27th.
I don't think Nate was available either on the 14th.
No, I didn't.
14th is out, so that would be the 27th.
Yeah, that's fine. Like a couple of weeks to get it right. Unless somebody calls them on the 20th a special cow, but there'd have to be something else besides. We could just do this.
Yeah, we can talk internally after the
We
meeting
could
and
talk
figure out a
to
date.
the clerk.
Yeah.
Work with the clerk.
Okay, I'll
All
talk
right.
to Carrie and see if something we can work out.
But it won't be before the 20th.
Yeah, okay. And the only thing would be for the open house. So the open house have done tentatively for the 28th. So it's the day after the 27th, which would be council. I was initially thinking of the 27th, but knowing that it's a council meeting and members on the committee would want to come, it's better on the 28th. So it's a Tuesday, mind you.
And I like the idea of having it presented to council, a public meeting, then before council approves it.
It's better staging.
All right.
So what I'll do is I'll talk to Carrie and iron out the dates for council and we'll get confirmation on that. And I'll let you know if Nathan's available to meet with council and the date was more confirmed.
So the 21st, the purpose of that meeting then?
I'll just our next meeting because I wasn't available.
But do we have a,
Agenda?
yeah, like what would we want to accomplish then? Just,
Well, once I know when we want to council, we either could talk about section of the climate action plan because it'd be ready by the 6th, so we can give you feedback then, or we could be talking about how we address council. We'll have to. I don't
think there's enough work though to hold the date.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
If there isn't, I'll email you because not being here is also.
Okay, no, that's fine. So that's the date of our next meeting.
That's the date of our next meeting. Yes.
Anything else?
The committee's next meeting?
It's the committee's next. It's a real one.
21st.
No,
This is
it's unusual a month because we're meeting more than twice in a month. But yeah.
Isn't there another little group? Not little group, another group.
No, there's no subcommittee work yet.
All right, we're doing it all here.
Yeah, we are.
I'm sorry, when is this committee meeting again?
So our next meeting is the 21st. We had rescheduled it because of 14th I won't be here because it's every
That's
second
fine.
Thursday.
Okay,
Okay.
That's how we got here.
okay.
Normally we don't have too many meetings, Sue.
So if there's nothing else, I'll accept the motion to adjourn and thank Marie and Richard again, and Peter, I guess I had to leave. Nate's moved it, and Sue seconded, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Again, 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, yes.